I didn't figure out my wife was cheating because I found some text message. I didn't smell cologne in the house. I didn't find a hotel receipt. I didn't catch some lipstick on a glass kind of clue. I figured it out because she kept getting irritated every time I came home early. That was the thing I couldn't let go of. Not disappointed. Not surprised. Not even the normal frustration you get when somebody changes plans on you at the last second. I mean irritated. Like I was showing up in the middle of something I wasn't supposed to interrupt. The first time, I told myself I was being unfair. The second time, I blamed stress. By the third, I stopped feeling guilty about noticing it. My name's Ben. I live outside Indianapolis, and I've worked in trucking most of my adult life. Back then, Lauren and I had been married 8 years. I still drove some runs myself, but I wasn't just a driver. That part matters, not because I'm trying to impress anybody, but because the way people saw my work was a big part of why this whole mess happened. My dad died when I was young. What he'd left me wasn't enough to turn me into some rich kid, but it was enough to give me a start if I used it right. I bought a truck, then another, reinvested everything I could, took bad loads, learned good contracts the hard way, hired slow, kept my debt manageable, bought a house before I ever met Lauren, and built the company one practical decision at a time. By the time my marriage fell apart, I had 15 trucks running under my company. Lauren knew I was doing well. She wasn't clueless, but she didn't really understand the structure of it, the value of it, or what years of putting money into equipment, contracts, payroll, maintenance, and property actually adds up to. To her, a lot of that just looked like Ben's trucking business. Her mom definitely saw it that way. Denise Howard was one of those women who could make an insult sound like concern if you weren't paying attention. She was always put together, always polished, always had the right glassware out and the right tone ready. She didn't come at me directly most of the time. She preferred little cuts. Lauren didn't think marriage would be this lonely. You work hard, Ben. I just don't know if this kind of schedule is sustainable for a family. She needs something steadier. That word came up a lot. Steady, stable, present. Denise used those words like she was describing an investment portfolio, not a marriage. And right around the time she started using them more, one name also started coming up a lot more than it ever had before. Mason Reed. Mason was a family friend Denise loved. He owned a couple neighborhood convenience stores and a liquor store. Nothing huge, but he looked successful in the way that plays well with suburban families. Nice watch, clean SUV, always local, always available, always knew somebody who could help with something. And Denise adored him. At first I treated it like background noise. Every family has one guy the mom likes too much because he shows up to charity events and shakes hands like he's running for office. Then, one night, Lauren and I were at Denise's for dinner, and Denise made some comment about how Mason had helped with something at a friend's property. Lauren laughed and said, "That's because Mason actually has a normal life. He's around. He's not halfway to Missouri every other week." It was said like a joke, and Denise smiled into her wine glass like she didn't enjoy it too much, which meant she absolutely did. I let it go. A few weeks later, I was home for less than 24 hours between runs. Lauren asked if I could go with her to some last-minute thing her mother wanted help with, and I told her I couldn't because I still had payroll and a maintenance issue to deal with before I left again. She said, "Sometimes I think you hide behind work because it's easier than being here." I said, "Being here is how all of this got built." And she just looked at me and said, "Yeah, but maybe some things matter more than building." That was one of those arguments that feels like it ends before it actually ends. Like the words stay in the room after both people stop talking. Then, maybe a month after that, we were driving back from dinner, and she said, "You know what your problem is? You think effort always looks the same to everyone." I asked what that meant. She said, "It means some people hear, 'I'm doing this for us,' and all they really experience is that you're gone. I said, and some people only respect what photographs well. She turned and looked out the window the rest of the drive home. That was the first time I really felt Mason as more than just Denise's favorite person. Lauren wasn't talking like somebody who disliked the comparison. She was leaning into it. After that, she started asking more and more questions about my roots. Not normal questions. Not just when I'd be back. It became details. Could dispatch change that? You think they'll unload you same day? Are you definitely laying over there? If they get you out fast, would you come straight home or take another load? If I told her I'd be delayed, she relaxed. If I told her there was any chance I might be home earlier than expected, something in her changed. Sometimes it was in her face. Sometimes it was just in her tone. But it was there. Once I got unloaded early and called to tell her I'd probably make it back Thursday night instead of Friday morning. She went quiet. Then she said, "Tonight?" Not in a happy way, in a thrown-off way. I remember staring at the diesel pump handle in my hand thinking, that is not the voice of somebody who misses you. I still tried to explain it away. Stress, distance, marriage getting stale. Any excuse that felt less ugly than the obvious one. Then Mason's name started surfacing in ways that bothered me more. He helped Denise with a gate. He dropped something off for Lauren. He knew a guy for the AC. He checked on a leak. He brought soup when Lauren wasn't feeling well. He was always useful, always nearby, always somehow in orbit when I was out of town. One night, one of my drivers, Terry, was near our neighborhood and texted me asking if he could swing by the house and leave signed paperwork in the mailbox so he wouldn't have to come by the office the next day. I told him sure. I was in Kansas. A few minutes later, he called and said, "Hey, didn't know y'all had company." I asked what he meant. He said, "There's a black Tahoe down the street from your place. Maybe just a neighbor. I only noticed because some guy was walking up from that direction while I was pulling away." Lauren had told me she was staying with Denise because Evelyn had a bad evening and Denise needed help. I called Lauren right away. She answered fast. Too fast. I asked where she was. She said, "At Mom's." Why? I told her Terry had seen a black Tahoe near the house and a guy coming from that direction. There was a pause. Then she went straight to offense. "Are you seriously doing this right now?" "Doing what?" "Making up some weird accusation because you're in a bad mood 3 states away." I said, "I didn't make anything up. Terry saw someone near the house." She sighed like I was embarrassing her. Then Denise texted me less than 2 minutes later. "Evelyn had a rough night. Lauren's with me. Please don't pile on tonight." That text didn't prove the affair. What it proved was that Denise was already involved in damage control. After that, I stopped trying to confront Lauren with half-formed suspicions. I started paying attention instead. Our side door camera had a funny habit of going offline late at night when I was on the road. Not all the time, just often enough to bother me. I checked the system log through the app and saw it wasn't losing connection. It was being manually disabled from inside the house. Then I checked the garage history. There were openings after 11 on nights Lauren had said she was at Denise's or already asleep. About a week later, I found a steakhouse receipt in the center console of Lauren's SUV. 2 dinners, 2 drinks, midweek. That same night, she had told me she was over at Evelyn's helping with medications and some paperwork. I asked her about the receipt. She barely looked at it. "Probably my mom's." "It was in your car." She tosses things everywhere, Ben. That answer by itself wasn't what got me. It was the look on her face. Like I wasn't her husband asking a fair question. Like I was becoming a scheduling problem. That was the point where I stopped feeling unsure and started feeling angry. The morning everything finally clicked, I was supposed to head out on a run that would probably keep me gone until Thursday. Lauren asked me, 3 different ways before breakfast was even over, whether I thought I'd get stuck somewhere or whether there was any chance I'd turn right back around. Then Denise called and, in that casual little voice of hers, asked if I was headed out for most of the week again. I hung up and just stood there for a second in my own kitchen holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. Because all at once it stopped looking like concern. It looked like coordination. They weren't reacting to my life. They were using my schedule to manage theirs. So that afternoon, I left exactly like I normally would. Hooked the trailer, headed west, checked in like usual. I made it as far as our yard near Terre Haute, handed the truck off to my lead driver, got into my pickup, and started back home. I didn't tell Lauren. I didn't tell Terry. I didn't tell anybody. The whole drive back, I kept hoping I was about to feel like an idiot. I wanted to catch nothing. I wanted to walk into an empty house and hate myself for doubting her. Instead, I turned into the neighborhood a little after 11 and saw Denise's Lexus parked half a block from my house. Not in front of it, not in a driveway, not near her mother's place. Half a block away, tucked off where nobody would immediately connect it to my house. That was the first moment I stopped hoping. I parked a couple streets over and walked. The porch light was off. The side camera was offline again. There was a thin strip of light under the kitchen blind. I went in through the mudroom. There were men's boots on the floor by the wall. Not mine. I remember just standing there, staring at them, like my brain thought if I looked long enough, they'd turn into something harmless. Then I heard laughter upstairs. Not loud, not wild, just normal, comfortable. That was what really got me. It wasn't secretive. It wasn't desperate. It sounded familiar, settled, like they'd all been in my house enough times to relax in it. I stepped into the kitchen, and Denise was at the island with a glass of white wine, scrolling her phone. She looked up so fast she nearly knocked the glass over. For half a second, she just stared at me. Then she said, "Ben." Not ashamed, not scared, just caught. And then I heard movement on the stairs. Lauren came down halfway and froze. Mason was behind her, shirt partly unbuttoned, belt hanging loose, face completely drained. Nobody said anything for a second or two. Then Lauren started crying. Just immediate crying, like she thought if she got there first, maybe it would control the room. Mason said, "Ben, look." I put my hand up and said, "Don't." My voice sounded a lot calmer than I felt. I looked at Denise and said, "You knew." She stood up slowly and set the wine glass down. Lauren has been unhappy for a long time. That was her first move. Not denial, not shock, a defense. Lauren kept saying my name. Mason took a half step back. I asked Denise, "How long have you been helping cover this?" She said, "This is not the time to turn everything upside down." That wasn't a confession, but it was close enough. Then she added, "There's already too much tension in the family right now, with Evelyn's legal stuff and everything else." And that was all I needed. Not because she laid out some grand master plan, because she didn't have to. In one sentence, all the pieces touched. The constant references to stability, the family pressure, the fake emergencies with Evelyn, the root questions, Mason always available, Denise always nearby. Lauren started saying, "It's not like that. It's not like that." But it was exactly like that. Maybe not a perfect written scheme. Real life is messier than that. But messy or not, they had absolutely been buying time, covering tracks, and using my schedule and Evelyn's name as part of it. I looked at Mason and said, "Get out of my house." He tried one weak little line. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I said, "You were comfortable enough to come upstairs in my house while her mother sat downstairs. Don't insult me by acting like this got out of hand 5 minutes ago." He didn't say another word after that. He grabbed his boots and left. That's the thing about men like that. They can act confident inside somebody else's marriage. They get real small once the husband is standing in front of them. Lauren sat down crying into her hands. Denise kept trying to hold on to the situation, but there was nothing left to manage now. I told Lauren I was calling an attorney in the morning. I told Denise she needed to leave. She looked genuinely offended. I think that was one of the most surreal parts of the whole night. After all of it, she still carried herself like she had some standing in my house. Once they were gone, I locked the door, sat down on the couch, and stayed there until it started getting light outside. I didn't punch anything, didn't throw anything, didn't pace the floor. I just sat there and replayed every little sign I had chosen to explain away, because the truth felt worse. That humiliation is hard to describe if you haven't lived it. The next few weeks were ugly in the usual ways. Lauren moved between apologizing, crying, blaming loneliness, blaming Denise, and saying she never thought it would go this far. That one actually made me laugh once, and I don't think she liked the sound of it. People don't accidentally build an affair around route timing, camera blind spots, late-night garage entries, and fake family emergencies. That's not one mistake. That's repeated cooperation. But if I'm being fair, one thing in our marriage was true. I was gone a lot. That did not justify cheating. It did not justify lying. It sure as hell did not justify bringing another man into my house while her mother sat downstairs helping her. But it was still true. And if I'm being honest with myself, I had spent years assuming that loyalty plus hard work should be self-explanatory. I thought if I kept building a life and paying the bills and staying faithful, that would speak for itself. What I didn't understand soon enough was that Lauren had started measuring marriage by presence and appearance, not by substance, and Denise had been feeding that for years. Once the divorce process started, reality hit Lauren in ways my words never had. Not because she suddenly discovered I was secretly rich. That wasn't the story. It was more that she had never bothered to understand what I had actually built, how it was structured, what was mine before marriage, what had grown during marriage, and how much of my life she had dismissed as trucking stuff without ever really looking at it. The house was mine before the wedding. A big part of the business had roots that predated the marriage. Other parts had grown during it, obviously, and had to be dealt with like adults through attorneys and documentation. That whole process was a lot less cinematic than people think. It wasn't some magic moment where she got nothing and I rode off into the sunset. It was paperwork, valuations, disclosures, arguments, ugly phone calls, and the slow death of whatever illusions were left. At one point, Lauren called me after seeing some of the financial breakdowns. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I knew you were doing well. I just didn't realize how much of it was built out." And I said, "That's because you never really wanted to understand it. You wanted the visible version of stable." She cried again. Then she asked why I never explained it better. That question got under my skin. Because hidden inside, it was this idea that maybe if I had marketed myself harder, talked bigger, dressed differently, made the success look shinier, she would have valued it more. I told her, I was your husband. I didn't think I needed to package myself. That was about the end of the honest part of our conversations. The thing with Evelyn came out later. A cousin of Lauren's told me Denise had been using Evelyn's health issues and legal meetings as cover for months. Sometimes Lauren was really there. Sometimes she wasn't. Denise blurred it all together enough that nobody questioned where Lauren actually was. When Evelyn found out her name had been used that way, she was furious. I didn't hear the argument myself, so I'm not going to pretend I know every word. But I know it was bad enough that Denise got pushed out of handling part of Evelyn's estate planning for a while. Not some dramatic movie exile. Just the kind of humiliating loss of control that matters a lot to a woman like Denise. As for Lauren and Mason, I heard they tried to make it real for a bit. Maybe they did. Maybe they mostly tried not to look stupid after blowing up 2 lives. Either way, it didn't last. And honestly, that didn't feel satisfying the way people think it would. By then, I was too tired to enjoy anybody else's consequences. What hit me harder was how weird grief gets when betrayal settles into your nervous system. I'd be in a truck stop and see the crackers Lauren used to buy, and it would throw me off for a minute. I'd hear footsteps over me in a motel room, and my chest would tighten before I even knew why. There were nights I sat in the cab and could picture Denise at my kitchen island so clearly it made me physically sick. That image stayed with me longer than the thought of Lauren and Mason ever did. Maybe because it made the whole thing feel colder, more organized, more humiliating. But over time, once I wasn't spending energy surviving that marriage anymore, my life got quieter, cleaner. I hired where I needed to hire, took fewer runs myself, put more time into the business decisions I'd been making half distracted for too long, started getting home more, started sleeping better, started feeling like my life belonged to me again instead of to somebody else's chaos. I'm not some cartoon-rich success story now. That was never the point. I'm just stable in the real sense. The bills are paid. The company is solid. Home feels peaceful. Nobody is tracking my route unless they're on payroll. About a year later, I ran into Lauren at a coffee place in Carmel. She looked tired. Not ruined. Not tragic. Just tired in a way that made her seem older than she was. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. At one point she said, "My mom was in my ear for years." I said, "I know." Then she looked down at her coffee and said, "I really thought Mason was more stable. I thought that's what my life was supposed to look like." There it was. Not the whole story, but the truest part of it. I told her, "No. You thought stable was something easier to show people?" She didn't argue, and I think that was the whole tragedy of it. Denise had trained her to confuse stability with polish, with visibility, with a man who was always nearby, easy to point to, easy to explain, easy to show off. She never learned that real stability can look boring from the outside. It can look like paperwork, diesel, long hours, payroll taxes, busted sleep, and a man too tired to advertise himself. By the time she understood that, there wasn't anything left for her to come back to. The last direct thing Denise ever said to me during the early divorce process wasn't some perfect movie line. It was more like this. She made it very clear that in her eyes, without Lauren and that family around me, I was still just a truck driver. And honestly, hearing that helped me more than it hurt. Because by then, I finally understood something simple. Denise hadn't misunderstood me. She had dismissed me on purpose. And once I saw that clearly, I stopped needing anything from her. Approval, respect, recognition, any of it. That was the real ending. Not revenge, not karma, not even closure, exactly. Just clarity. And after a betrayal like that, clarity is about the closest thing to peace you get.